Good morning, everyone. Jaden Rio, helping companies do business in Latin America, appreciates your participation and welcomes you to the webinar Nearshore, the ABC for tech companies looking to invest in Colombia. It is my pleasure to introduce the speaker of today. We have Fabio Osorio. Okay, hello, Fabio. He is our managing director of our Colombia office. Well, a little bit of his background. Well, he has participated in different tax update seminars at the national and international levels. He has extensive experience providing tax advisory, consulting, and diagnostic service in due diligence process and in tax planning and compliance at work at national and international levels. All right, this webinar will last 50 minutes and then we will have a 10-minute session for the Q&A. Therefore, we invite you to send us all of the questions that you have during this transmission of this webinar. YouTube Fabio will help us answer them at the end of this webinar in our Q&A session. Well, moving on with the webinar, let's see the topics that we will discuss in this webinar, okay? The first thing that we will see is why Colombia, then relevant tax and corporate aspects to consider when doing business in Colombia, accounting aspects and other obligations in your operations in Colombia, general labor aspects, and for the last part, we will see the investment incentives. All right, well, Fabio, please start explaining us why Colombia.
Thank you, Ale, and thank you everyone for joining us today at this webinar. It's a pleasure to have you here. Yes, let's talk about why Colombia. As you will see, Colombia has the lowest foreign direct investment barriers in Latin America. So, such as Peru, Mexico, and Chile. So Colombia has at the top of this foreign direct investment. Not just because of the location where Colombia is, because it's easy to do business here and connect with different countries around the region, such as the US, but also because Colombia is in that top of the countries in Latin America with more than 100 free trade zones throughout the country. And I'm gonna explain what is or why is this beneficial for the investors in Colombia. Also, as you will see you see in this slide, the foreign direct investment by the economic activity, most of them are focusing on financial and business services, more of the 27%. And Colombia is ranked in the number 12 among the main developing entities or economics receiving foreign direct investment, and the number 25 globally to do business here. So that are the main reasons. Another one, the reason that you see in the next slide is that Colombia has one of the cities, which is the main city located in the country, where has received more than 379 technology innovation companies that have been in Colombia, and that city, Medellin, is situated between the 6 cities that has built so far the tech industry future, and as well along with Bogota, along with Medellin, it is Bogota that has been gaining ground and the position themselves and innovation and technology centers. As an example, you see a company, the name House, La House, which is a Colombian and Mexican prop tech that has announced recently that has received an injection of $100 million for the round, and now has more than 135 million for its operations. Other reason is in the next slide that Colombia can offer as well local talent that has made a leap in quality. Nowadays, the workforce that you can find in Colombia is a great force. Engineers and any support team that you need here in Colombia, that is a great qualification for your company. There are local technology providers as well. Data information volume has increased now year to year, and the digital adaptation tends to increase in the country day to day, as well as there are many tax incentives that we are going to talk later in this webinar. In the next slide, we are seeing what is expecting for technology in 2021. Well, the artificial intelligence, as you might know, evolving Internet of Things, big data, virtual and augmented reality, and video streaming. This is one of the things, or more of the things that Colombia has implemented, not just for the companies, but also even for in the tax authority. They have been implementing artificial intelligence for the procedures and everything that has been built inside the tax authority. But you are not alone. As you can see in the next slide, there are many promotion entities who can support you in this process to have a soft landing in your operation, such as Invest in Bogotá, Pro Colombia, Ruta N Medellin, which is one of the biggest promotion entities in Medellin that you can help you as a tech company to have a soft landing. And we are very good. We have a good relationship with those entities, and we put in contact with the right person in order just to helping you to have soft landing of your operations.
Great. Thank you very much, Fabio. Now, tell us more about the legal and tax aspects that a foreign company needs to consider when they are looking to do business in Colombia, please.
Thank you, Ali. Sure, there are many aspects to be considered, but let me just start explaining how to operate. In Colombia, you can do it in 3 different ways. First way, and maybe you are already doing that, is from abroad. Doing everything from abroad, and maybe someone in Colombia, an entity or a person helping you doing something you need to perform your activities. But this way can trigger a permanent establishment, which is the second way to do business in Colombia. The permanent establishment is a tax fiction that the companies will have in Colombia when they're performing fixed businesses in Colombia. I'm gonna be deeper in the next slide. And the third one is direct operations, which is the most important thing when you are thinking of doing business in Colombia. So talking about the businesses from abroad and the permanent establishment. If you have someone in Colombia, a person or an entity who helping you doing something, you have to bear in mind that if that entity or person does not any power to close contracts or doesn't do any essential businesses or activities of your businesses in Colombia, and the activities the person or the entity is considered as an auxiliary or preparatory activity, it will be considered that you don't have any issue or risk to trigger any permanent establishment. However, if the person or the entity is carrying out all or part of your activity, even if as is an agent, but the agent is dependent of you because are doing everything just for you and doesn't have any additional service to anyone else, it means that it is dependent of you and all of the activities are triggered by the company, the foreign company in Colombia, and will be trigger a permanent established and tax obligation that I'm going to explain later in these webinars. As an examples of this permanent establishment are branches or foreign companies, agencies, offices, mines, and thirds, and oil and gas wells. Let's talk about now the ways to do direct operations in Colombia. So if you do direct operations, you can decide to set up a subsidiary or a branch. The easiest way might be on a subsidiary because of the benefits to have a subsidiary and the SAS, which is the most common entity that all today the investors are setting in Colombia. Why? Because this subsidiary won't have or could have just one stakeholder, won't have any obligation of a statutory auditor at the moment of its constitution, and there are more other benefits of this. That is more easier to set up than the branch. However, if you need to bring your experience to Colombia, you might need to set up a branch. The branch might take more time and more obligations. For instance, you have to have a statutory auditor since the time you set up the branch, and among others obligations. How to decide which entity? Well, I just explained some examples, but also you have to consider the incorporation process, the stakeholders, the liability regime, the capital, the social object, the duration of the entity. If you want just to have a specific time or limited time of activity, well, maybe the branches will be great to have it. In the next slide, you will see what is more or less the time that you will need to incorporate an entity in Colombia. That will be changed between the entity that you decide, if it is a subsidiary or a branch, but more or less will take between 4 to 6 business weeks. The more time will be considered the incorporation, all the documents, the corporate documents, and the banks. You know, there's sometimes the banks, depending the country, they request more information than the other countries, but it will be more between 1 or 2 weeks on that. And after that, you will have 1 week just to set up an initial records for your accounting, your activities.
Super. Now that we all know the ways of doing business in Colombia, Fabio, why don't you explain us more about the effects and tax matters that we need to be aware of, please?
Sure. Thank you, Ale. So the taxation in Colombia, main taxes and main obligations. And let me just start with the corporate one, the income tax. Nowadays, the income tax, which is the annual tax return that you have to issue in Colombia, has a rate of 31%. And there is an asterisk here because it is also to mention that in Colombia, it is discussing a tax reform nowadays, and it's expected to be issued in the few days. And in that discussion, it is expected that the income tax rate will be increased up to 35% from the next year. So that is a huge impact on the taxation in Colombia. However, that is not too bad for the tech companies, because I'm going to explain later the benefits and the exemption that the tech companies will have in Colombia, so they will avoid legally this 35% of income tax, at least for 5 years, as I can explain later. The other taxes, the indirect tax, is the VAT, which is has a general rate of 19%. Nonetheless, most of the tech company usually perform activities to be exported. If you do that, you will be granted, or you will be granted a 0% rate. It means an exemption of the VAT, and you can even request all the VATs that you might pay in Colombia for the acquisition of goods or services, you can request the favor balance before the tax authorities. Another tax or obligation is the withholding tax. The withholding tax return, which is monthly in Colombia and is an advance payment. Usually the companies has to do this withholding to the companies when you are acquiring services or goods, deducting from the payment that is need to be done. Another taxes, which is important to mention, that in Colombia, there is not just corporate or national taxes or federal taxes, as might happen in Mexico and the US, but also municipal taxes. And one of the most important municipal taxes is the industry and commerce tax, which tax the gross revenue that you generate inside a city or municipality. And the tax rate is about 1%, but it will be a little bit higher or a little bit less depending on the city that you are located. Other municipal taxes, there, in case you have vehicles, properties, you might be paying tax as well on this. And finally, about the international taxation, you have to consider as well the transfer pricing. Transfer pricing, it is an international rule that applies to all the companies that are performing activities between related parties or the local party and the parent company. So you have to fulfill that and issue annually an transfer pricing return and transfer pricing study. In the next slide, also what is important to consider is the taxation and the consideration about the dividends. When you are doing business, obviously you are thinking, what is going to happen when I get profits? So first of all, it's important to mention from the accounting and corporate perspective that the profit that you generate, you can pay it as a dividend, but before that, you have to constitute at least a legal reserve of 10% of that profit up to 50% of the capital stock reach. But after you consider that, in the next slide, you will see what are the rates, the tax rate of dividends. So if you consider already the obligation for the accounting and purposes, you get an accounting profit and you get a tax profit. Both usually are not the same. So the tax rule said that if the profit that you are distributed as a dividend already paid tax in Colombia on the head of the company, you will be taxed the dividends just at rate of 10%. But if the dividends or the profit that is distributed as a dividend didn't pay tax on the head of the company, you have to deduct a 31% rate before the 10%. In other words, as an example, if the accounting profit is $100 and the tax profit is $800 because you have any exemption or other consideration, and the tax profit is less than accounting, it means that the difference between the 100 and 80 didn't pay tax on behalf of on the head of the company. It means that 20 has to be deducted or will be the base for the 31% and the 10%, as I mentioned, of the rate. The net rate will be, or the final rate will be more or less the 39% when you are distributing dividends that didn't pay taxes on the head of the company.
Thank you very much, Fabio. Now, please tell us about the accounting consideration that a company needs to consider also, please.
Sure. So moving on to this part, that is important that, well, we already mentioned the general tax consideration. Now, about the accounting considerations. First one is, it's important to mention that in Colombia, there is an obligation to have accounting books and register those based on the accounting standard applicable in Colombia, which is IFRS. And the IFRS are three different groups. The first one in Colombia is the full IFRS. The full IFRS will be applicable for multinational companies or companies that are in the stock market, or the companies that the parent company already use the IFRS as a standard accounting standard. The second group, which is the most common use in Colombia, more or less the 70 or 80% of the companies are using that, is for the small and medium entities. For the small and medium entities will be considered the IFRS SME, which is a general standard, but there are some difference between the full IFRS and the small and medium entities IFRS. And the last group is like the residual group, where any of the entities that didn't classify or couldn't be in the group 1 or group B will be in the group 3. Usually are the simplified accounting rules, and there are for very, very small entities in Colombia. Other obligation in the next slide, we are presenting something very important. You will see 7 obligations. First of all, it is important to mention that in Colombia, different to other countries, it is needed to issue a financial statements annually with the notes of reveal of the financial statements. So annually you have to issue that, and you have to renew the Chamber of Commerce. The registration before the Chamber of Commerce is just not set up the company, but also you have to renew that registration annually in order to avoid to be closed. Secondly, the ordinary meetings. You have to issue annually ordinary meetings in which you approve the decision made, and also the financial statements. You have to fill in, as well as I mentioned, the financial statements and send it before the Chamber of Commerce. Report as well before the superintendent of companies, the financial statements as well. You have to report any business group that you might have in Colombia. In case you have more than one entity in Colombia, you have to report it as well annually. One important thing that are for multinational entities is the self-control and comprehensive risk management system, or SARGRILAF in Spanish, or the name in Spanish, that I'm going to explain later. So in the next slide, let's move on to the SARGRILAF. The SARGRILAF, as I mentioned, that is a system which prevent the money laundering, or is for money laundering risk prevention. So the companies which has assets more than $9 billion, or has operation on the Bitcoin, so crypto assets, and the revenues are higher than $600 million, have to fulfill this SARGRILAF. So it is important because most of the Colombian tech companies might have any relationship between the crypto assets and Bitcoin as well. What is the SARGRILAF? Well, it's like compliance rules that you have to fulfill. You have to do a due diligence, for an intensified due diligence for your account receivables, or your vendors and your clients, or even for your employees. You have to do this due diligence in order to determine if any risk, laundry, or there is any relation on that part. Any suspicious transactions, you have to report it. Identify the counterparty beneficial owner. This part is very important, actually, because the tax reform that is discussed in the Congress nowadays are including specific rules of beneficial owners, where you have to reveal who is the final person, not the company, the parent company, but the person, the final person at the top of the structure, and you have to reveal that. In the SARGRILAF, you have to go up to this beneficial owner in order to see who is and if there is no risk about money laundering. And the compliance officer as well, which is like an auditor, an external auditor, has to perform all these activities that I have mentioned and send some reports to the board director of the company as well as to the legal entities in Colombia.
Perfect. Another important part to consider in Colombia are the labor aspects. So Fabio, please tell us more about this or what can you tell us about it, please?
Yeah, sure, Alex. Thank you. And that's right. One of the most important things when you are investing in Colombia is to know what is the payroll contribution, how much will be cost your employees in Colombia. But let me explain first what kind of contracts or agreements you might sign with your employees. There are two kinds mainly of contracts. The first one is an indefined term, and the second is the fixed term. You can use any of them for the employees. Usually, the companies normally use the indefined term because it's the easiest way and to hire someone and to get the talent from the people, because normally the people doesn't, or the person doesn't want to move if you know that it is just a fixed term contract for a short time of period. Both contract has a particular consideration is that you will have 2 months of period of time. Well, you will prove if the person is the right person for the position or not, and you won't have any trouble if you decide just to lay off that person. The minimum salary of Colombia is around $239, and there is an integral salary for management usually. For managers, usually the companies use that. That is about $3,000, $3,100, more or less. And this integral salary is composed with the mandatory benefits that is listed here. For instance, the service premium and the retirement fund and the interests on the retirement fund are included in the integral salary. So the main difference between the ordinary salary and the integral salary is that the first one doesn't include the other benefits such as the service premium, but the integral salary does. So you won't have to pay more than the integral salary. The benefits for the employees that I have mentioned, for instance, the service premium, which is 1 month a year, the retirement fund, which is another salary a year, or the portion depending on the time the person worked during the year, and the interests on the retirement fund, which is about 12% per year based on the retirement fund. There is another mandatory benefits, and it is paid just for a person who earn less than 2 minimum wages, and this is the transportation subsidy. And regarding the severance payment that you might have to pay in Colombia, it is about for those who earn less than $3,000 a month, you will pay 30 days of salary for the first year, and then 20 days for the second and the other years. Instead, for the other persons who earn more than $3,000, you have to pay 20 days of salary for the first year and 15 days of salary for the next years. The other aspects are the contributions. In the next slide, you will see what are the payroll contributions in Colombia. But to summarize, the employer has to pay about 34% up to 51.9%, depending on the salary and the condition of the employee. What are the those contributions, the health contribution, which is mandatory, the pension contribution, the contribution to occupancy risk, SENA contribution, ICBF contribution, and contribution to family compensation fund. Those three last one are specific for Colombian rules that the government has included in the regulation in Colombia.
Okay, now we will discuss about the tax incentive for the investors. Well, these are the tax benefits for foreign investors, which are Orange Economy, Mega Investment Regime, applicable for the Free Trade Zone. Then we will have the Free Trade Zone. And the last one is the CDI application, which is the Double Taxation Agreement. Fabio, could you please tell us more about these incentives and how this benefits the investors that are looking to do business in Colombia, please?
Sure. Let's start talking about Orange Economy. There are the consideration. I was explaining before and tell you that even if you have, or in Colombia will be at 35% of income tax rate for corporations, there is an exemption for companies who can apply for this Orange Economy. And what is the Orange Economy? That is a specific regimen for exemption for companies who develop technology and value add industry and related activities. The exemption is for 5 years. That's the rule that actually is included nowadays in the tax reform that is discussing and is expected to issue these 5 years. Before the tax reform were considered 7 years, but nowadays it's changing just for 5 years. With which kind of entities? For instance, there are the computer consultings, activities developed related to develop of computer systems, edition of software programs, movie post-productions, sounds and music recording activities, literary, music, and theatrical creations. There are just few of the listed. They're not all, but the main. And what are the requirements? The requirements are that you need to have a Colombian entity. And that entity has to be set before June of 2022. You have to have a number of employees, and the number of employees will depend on the activity or the services that you will be rendered, but never can be less than 3 employees. The invest project, it is needed to be presented before the Ministry of Culture, and the investment has to be at least $42,000, and applies also for free trade zones, which is very important to mention because, as I'm gonna explain later, the free trade zones regimen, well, that can grant you additional benefits, not just for the exemption of the income tax, but also VAT, customs, and tariffs. So this is the main one that I think is very important for the companies nowadays to consider, tech companies, because it's very good for that. The other one is the mega investment regimen. The mega investment regimen, it is or was thought to set up in the reform, because it was set in tax reform, mainly for hotels. However, it's important that for tech companies nowadays, this regimen is a huge important regimen as well. There are companies, actually there was a company who set up a data center in Colombia and used this mega investment as a regimen to use and decrease the corporate income tax. It means that you will have for the 5 first years an exemption, and then you will have a special income tax rate of 25%. So compared to the 31 nowadays, but 35 that will be next year if the tax reform is issued, there are 8 points of the rate that you will be safe if you use this mega investment. You need to you will have a legal stability for 20 years. It means that even if there is any additional tax reform and there issue new taxes in Colombia, you won't be affected by those taxes because you will have a legal stability. You can have as well an accelerated depreciation in the first 2 years for all the assets of your operations. And as I mentioned, the special rate, but in this case, for dividends will be applied as well in case you won't pay really the tax for the fully accounting profit that you will trigger or generate in your company. It means that you have to pay dividends, you have to pay taxes when you are distributing the dividends to the parent company. However, in this regimen, you will save at least 8 points of that tax. What are the requirements? The requirements are mainly to invest and execute within the 5 years, $290 million approximately. Invest in that investment has to be related to productive property, plant, and equipment related to the activities. And it must have to be approved by the government as well, the project. You have to present the project before the government, and the government has to approve before 2024. So we have plenty of time nowadays. If you are thinking of making an investment in Colombia, data center, call center, you will have plenty of time to be in this regimen. And other requirement that is very important as well to consider, if you have to generate at least 400 direct employments associated with the project developed. But for the technology area, you need just to generate at least 250 employees of the high technology component. So this is the mega investment. So move on to the other slide. Let's talk about now about the free trade zones. So what are the free trade zones first? The free trade zones in Colombia are a specific delimited area where you can locate your activities in the country, and it would be considered that is not part of the Colombian tax regimen, but as a free trade zone, as the name mentioned. It means that you will have to pay just for income tax purposes 20%. That are 15 points less than the rate that will be enforced if the tax reform passed in 2022. So you will save 15 points. But also, you have no tariff, no VAT on goods or services you acquire for your activities inside the free trade zones. The purchase from the rest of the country as well won't trigger any VAT for you, so you will save that as well. And you will have the possibility to nationalize raw material or financial products when the goods are to be sold in the rest of the country. And the goods produced in the free trade zones acquire origin for the purposes of free trade agreements. What does it mean? It means that you don't have to pay any taxes if you receive in Colombia, do something in Colombia, and export that. And usually these free trade zones are usually used for companies that produce any goods. However, that's very important to let you know that nowadays the service companies and the tech companies are using this free trade zone because they can locate a call center or build the data center inside the free trade zone, and they will save all the tariff, customs, and VAT that you have to pay importing the material needed to build that data center. So you won't have to pay any tax on that. You will save much money on this process. And lastly, in the last slide, I just want to let you know what are the double taxation agreements that Colombia has, and why those are very important. Mainly, we have double taxation agreement with Mexico, Chile, Peru, Ecuador, and Bolivia, but also with Spain, Switzerland, Canada, Portugal, Korea, India, Czech Republic, UK, Japan, and France. The last one, no enforced yet because it's just passing the law in Colombia. But these double taxation agreements are relevant mostly when you are doing operation between related parties or thinking about the corporate structure. You're saying, I don't want to have any taxation when you are distributing dividends. That's very important. You can avoid legally using the double tax agreements, because usually when you have a double tax agreement in your structure, for instance, Colombia and Mexico is the parent company. If you are distributing to Mexico, you will have, you can reduce the percentage of your the withholding tax dividends up to 0%. So the dividends are the double taxation agreements, so the treaties are very important when you are thinking in international operations, as well as if you have to pay any royalties, any technical services or assistance services to a parent company or any related party. If those are with countries that you have double taxation agreement with Colombia, you will save that withholding tax, or even if you don't save, you will avoid double taxation, and you will, in the country of the resident, you will have a tax credit in order to reduce the taxes in Colombia and make more efficient your operation abroad. Well, thank you very much for your time. That is what I want to let you know mostly about Colombia. Please feel free to send us the comments or questions you might have. I don't know, Ale, if there's a question related to the presentation.
Yes, thank you very much, Fabio, for your great contribution to this topic. Well, now we are on the time for our Q&A session. And obviously, if there are still unanswered questions at the end of this blog, don't worry, okay? We will contact you as soon as possible via email with the replies. And obviously, I would like to remind you that this webinar will be available in our YouTube channel, okay? All right, we are having this a question that we are receiving, and this is the first one. Okay, Fabio, so the first one goes this way. The orange economy regime can be applied in conjunction with the free zones regime. In other words, free zones also apply to companies that provide service?
Yes, Ali, definitely. As I mentioned, the free trade zone, mainly the investor things that are used just for companies that produce goods, but what is real is that nowadays it's more used for companies that render services, and it can be combined with the orange economy. As I mentioned, you can use the orange economy and have an exemption of 5 years for income tax, and the next years you will have a specific rate in the free trade zone of just 20%. So you will save at least 15 points on your corporate income tax, which is very good for investors.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Fabio. Okay, we have another question. It says, in Colombia, can accounting be carried out under US GAAP?
No, that is not possible. You can have like a parallel book using the US GAAP. However, the official accounting law or regimen is based on the IFRS. So you cannot just register US GAAP. You have to convert for corporate purposes, but locally you have to use IFRS always. Even if there is a full IFRS or there is small and medium entities IFRS.
Okay, thank you very much, Fabio. Okay, this is our final question. There are no more to answer, and it says this way. A permanent establishment, must carry out accounting?
That is a great question, actually. For accounting purposes, there is no obligation because the permanent establishment, it will be considered as a legal entity in Colombia for commercial purposes. However, for tax purposes, there are like some rules that you have to fulfill. It's like accounting books, but it's no fully accounting books. It's just a tax book, and there are such a huge difference between the local, the accounting and the tax books. So, in other words, you don't have any obligation for accounting local procedures, but for tax purposes, yes. If you have a branch in Colombia, which is considered as well as a permanent establishment in Colombia, there is a specific rules for commercial activities in this case, and in this example, you will have that obligation.
Well, thank you very much, Fabio, for helping us answer all of these questions. And well, we have reached at the end of this webinar, and Jay Del Rio, helping companies do business in Latin America, appreciates your interest and remain at your service. And we leave you this email so you can contact us in case you have any question or something related to this topic at contacto@jdelrio.com. Thank you very much for your time and your participation today, and have a great day.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Ale.
Thank you, Fabio. Bye-bye.
Bye.